Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
You are watching a Fact TV presentation of the Village of Bellows Falls Trustees Meeting.
Village Trustees regular meeting on Tuesday, August 22nd, 2023, 6 p.m. to order. And move to approve the minutes of Tuesday, July 11, 2023. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of July 11th, 2023.
Is there a second? I'll second. Motion is made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of approving the minutes of the regular Bellows Falls Village Trustees meeting of Tuesday, July 11th, 2023 would say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Motion carries. I would also entertain a motion to approve the Bellows Falls Village special meeting that took place on Wednesday, July 26, 2023.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Can we second if we didn't attend?
You could, yes.
Okay, I'll second.
So the motion is made and seconded that we would approve the minutes of the Bellows Falls Village special meeting Wednesday, July 26, 2023. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And the motion carries. We'll move on to additions to the agenda for routine administrative matters and or pressing matters that require ratification at a future meeting. I do know that our place has submitted a permit for hanging of a banner for the 14th of September. So we will not meet prior to that. So I would like to add that under item 3, request for event parades, and we'll add it as D, hanging the banner. Any other additions to the agenda for this evening? Seeing none, I would move on to public comment on items not on the agenda. That's 3 minutes per person. Yes.
Betsy said she was going to be here and I don't,
She wants to be upstairs.
kind of know what to do.
She's not, she left.
Okay.
I'm not a deacon, most of you know me. I worked with Ellen Jones at the garden as a reference. And this is the outcome of the decision on that. If I can just read this to you. Betsy, we made a lot of copies. I made enough for everybody to have a copy, but she's got them.
Is that for the Rose of the River Garden?
Yeah.
That is on the agenda,
You're actually
ma'am.
on
So
the
that's item 1 on the agenda.
Oh, okay.
So if you,
Shall I go ahead?
well, if you'd like to wait, probably about 5 minutes, and then we'll come back right back to you. Okay? Any other public comment on items not on the agenda? Any comments? No, we'll move on to the manager's report.
So a couple items just for update for the board. So if you remember a while ago, we used to get money from the AT&T tower at 116 Pond Road. AT&T had a tower there and had a lease with the village. That lease, AT&T moved off that tower over a year ago, probably closer to 2 years ago now. Stopped with their lease payments. They did sell that tower, the rights of that tower, to another company who spent the last year and a half trying to find somebody to co-locate and could not find anybody else to co-locate. I'd asked them to hold off for at least a year to see if we could try to find somebody else who might be able to use that facility, since it was expensive to build and it seemed like a waste just to tear it down. So they have not found anybody. I finally called the state and about a couple weeks ago and said, is there any need for this tower in your broadband, your rural broadband program? Because the state is spending a lot of money on rural broadband expansion. It's a big point of investment. But the people that I spoke to said all of the money that's going into rural broadband expansion is going to fiber to the home. They're not doing anything over the air, so they do not need towers. So at this point, there is nobody realistically to relocate to this tower. So sometime in September, that crew's gonna come back and take down the structures and remove that infrastructure. So you might see some activity on Pond Road or at that location until that tower's been removed. But unfortunately, nobody was able to co-locate and we could not find another person to lease that facility. So it is gonna come down.
Okay.
The second thing is, and this is something I wanted to just work with the board, as well as we're gonna talk to the select board and also folks out in Saxons River. One of the things that came up as we did our after action reports on the most recent emergency management problems with the flooding and other issues, and last year when we lost our power, was notifications. And so Vermont has a system. It's a sign up system. You have to opt in. It's called BT Alert, where they do provide communities an opportunity to give specific alerts for your community, as well as statewide and other types of alerts for weather and severe storms. We think we're going to try that out. They're able to use Facebook. They're able to use cell phones. They're able to use a variety of ways to contact people. Hopefully we'll do some publicity and see if we can get more people that might be able to participate in that. And I know that there was some concern that people didn't feel that they were properly notified about the outage and the potential issues that might have occurred. That was a relatively short emergency, but certainly if we get into larger scale emergencies, we're going to need something to be able to communicate with people. This is a first step. It's a statewide system, so it's nothing for us to opt in and then try to see if it's going to be useful or not useful. The technology that's behind it is from a company called Everbridge, who also sells that whole package of information directly to communities where you can do other things as well, more bells and whistles. But at this point, I think just to get into the system and try it and see how successful we might be with getting people to opt in, I think we're going to pursue the Vermont Alert portion of it first, and then report back to you. We'll see how good we do with penetration. We'll see how useful it is or it isn't. And then we might come back and talk about other options as we go forward for emergency communication. So first step, we'll let you know as we progress, and I'm sure we'll do some publicity and try to do things to get people to participate. So just a follow-up item from previous meetings.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Jim?
Well, we've just approved a fairly significant amount of money for a communication system, if I'm using the wrong word, for our village and town,
Right.
Fire, police, DPW, et cetera. Is this, would this mesh with that system, or, I mean, are we?
Yeah, so what you would be able to do is to be able to use this particular BT Alert program to send out geographically specific notices to people. So, you know, like in this last flood, we might have only told people maybe in some of the trailer parks or some of the areas that were experiencing high water, but we certainly would have not sent out an entire broadcast to everybody in Rockingham saying, you know, you need to leave your house because we're going to flood. So it's just another way to try to get people notices and real-time information. So that other system is more internal to our you know, public safety folks, and so it doesn't really impact the public directly. This one will, and we'll see how effective it might be in communicating. So it's a first step. We're going to try it and see how it goes.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else?
And there's no fee for they don't charge for that, right?
No,
You just gotta get signed up.
just have to, right, you have to establish an account, go through some training, and then
Yeah.
make it available, and we'll try it. So we're going to pursue it and we'll let you know how it goes.
Any other questions or comments for Scott? Okay, we'll move on to the agenda. Item 1 is the request to relocate the Rosie the Riveter Garden to the Hetty Green Park.
I just read this thing to you. Better than trying to tell it. Asking that Rosie the Riveter, stone be moved to a more prominent place in Bellows Falls. Rosie the Riveter came from a poster of a female factory worker who was urging women to join the World War II effort with the declaration, "We can do it." Our Rosie was Margaret Chidd, who came here as a dressmaker and ended up making hammocks for ships and for use in confined places. She also worked as a plane spotter to protect the industries in Springfield. Around 5 million civilian women served in the defense industry and the workforce. 75% were married with homes and family and children to care for. There needs to be more recognition of the role of women in the war effort. We would like the stone moved to the Hetty Green Park near the war memorial that honors the men who went to war. It could be a small pot with a stone and the 4 roses that are named for Rosie the Riveter.
So you have in your packet, you do have a picture of the proposed change. So it would be going into the grass,
That spot here?
that spot right there.
Which spot? Oh,
Into that square
oh,
right
that one
there.
there.
Yes.
Okay.
Basically an unplanted square of grass in between the sidewalks.
And we bring it up from down by the sewage plant, right? Isn't that where it is now?
It's not, yeah, it's along the fence
Along the
line.
trail down there and bring it up.
It's up beyond the labyrinth. It's lost.
Okay,
You know, from the stone, it goes straight down into the river. That, that's a pile of the remains of the paper mill industry.
right.
And,
Seems like an appropriate place. Yes.
a bunch of us women have been discussing this a good deal of late this summer because it's lost where it is. And to just abolish it seems kind of unfair.
Right.
There are war memorials. I walk up in the cemetery all the time. There are war memorials to men all over everywhere, There's nothing to
Mhm.
the role that women play.
How are you gonna get it up there?
Well, that's not, not
That's part of the request.
that's part of the request would be to move it. It's got, in looking at it, we sort of measured it. We need a spot that's about 4 feet in the front and 3 feet deep.
Yeah.
The stone is in the middle of it. There are 4 rosy roses, which are not big roses, they're little roses. We would need to dig up the roses before the stone is dug up. I will babysit with the roses gladly. But I think the roses need to be there because it's the symbol of the whole thing. The more we talk about it, the more we think up things, and I don't want to burden you with all that. But it just seems kind of appropriate. I don't know.
Is it heavy?
Huh?
Is it heavy?
It was set, Chris Potter, but I think put it in originally. It's sunk with some cement around it. The stone is about,
Yeah,
it's heart shaped.
all right.
And it just says, in memory of Margaret Chidd, our Rosie. And there are 2 Rosie signs, one's on a pole by there. We would need to take that out, and the other one is the entrance to the path up. I looked at that the other day. I could take it out with a Phillips screwdriver. That would not be a problem. But in a sense, I'm just thinking about it. It's a fresh idea, I realize, but maybe something we ought to be thinking about.
So who maintains the Hetty Green, could highway department move that?
That area belongs to the Historical Society, and they are responsible for its upkeep. We did the upkeep last summer, Ellen, who had the wildflower garden there in tribute to her mother. I mean, I'm a mother. I think that's kind of a nice thing to do. It was beautiful.
You were asking about
The park itself.
I was asking about Hetty Green. I think the
Oh,
Wade's
they have a
question,
green park.
just
Oh.
thinking about who's gonna
I mean, it's mowed and it's
Yeah.
maintained.
Oh, no, I
Yeah.
mean, like, just someone who's going to move it, because I think it's.
We'll
more
work
than-
with them and do it. It shouldn't be more than a half a day,
Somebody just to pick
honestly.
it up, you know,
Shouldn't take.
You gotta scrape the grass off and move a stone.
We need
Transplanting
to
the
dig
roses and that, we'll leave it up to the folks to do that, right?
get a bag of topsoil to put into it.
Yeah,
I've got some rose fertilizer in my garage that we can feed it with. In a sense, this is as much a tribute to Ellen, who is is Margaret's daughter. Ellen's name is also Margaret, but anyway, she worked terribly hard for 3 years doing a work of art. And there were just some people who didn't want her to have the credit for that, and so it was destroyed. It's just a bunch of weeds now, it's terrible. But over the last couple of summers, there have been a number of us who have cared for that place up there. We're not caring for it, it looks terrible. It looks unloved, okay? And a garden needs to be loved. And so it's kind of, it doesn't occur to the people who destroyed it that the job still goes on. You don't walk out in the garden and say, go for it. It needs a lot of care. It's not getting any of that. And this is another reason why I really would love to see the stone moved.
Oh, yeah.
Ellen's in very, very serious physical condition, and I don't know whether she'll live long enough to do this.
So I would entertain a motion to accept the recommendation to move the Rosie the Riveter stone up to the park in the, as pictured in the photo.
I'll make that motion to approve the request to relocate Rosie the Riveter garden to Hay Green Park.
Thank you.
As
So the motion is made, seconded. Is there any discussion, any further discussion? Hearing no other discussion, all those in favor would say aye. Those opposed, no. And we will be
I will go home.
taking care of that.
Okay, but I need to be informed in the process. I want to get Ellen in here to see it. She's got a care,
Absolutely.
She doesn't drive.
So I think Scott will keep.
yeah, we'll work together. We'll get Betsy involved and make sure we
And
get
I
in touch
want
with her.
her, in a sense, that's what wants to happen.
Okay.
She's physically incapable.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Alrighty.
See, that was easy, wasn't
I
it?
don't want to-
Okay, item 2 on the agenda is appointment of the village moderator. So, back on June 25th, 2023, we posted, that there was a position open of moderator. So that has been posted and out there. We have received, 2 interested candidates, one being Deb Wright, the other being Dennis Hardy. And I guess at this point, I would. And I guess at this point, I would ask if there are any other nominations, either from the floor or from members of the board. Do you know of anybody else?
I've not received anything else.
Okay. So at this point, I kind of handed out the 2 letters, or had Kathleen hand out kind of the 2 letters that we did receive. And therefore, at this point, I guess I would entertain a motion to appoint one of these people as moderator. Jason.
Yes, I think both of the people that submitted applications are qualified and will do an excellent job. I'm going to nominate Deb Wright because I think I've seen Deb contribute a huge amount of time and effort and caring to this village and to the town, for that matter, over the last 10 or 15 years. And I just think it would be appropriate to recognize her efforts and make her the moderator. So.
Is there a second? Any seconds? Do not hear a second. Is there another motion?
I'll move that Dennis Hardy be nominated as the moderator.
Is there a second?
I'll be honest, I don't know Dennis. I've met Deb very briefly, just through my interactions with the board prior to me joining. So I'm kind of, for me, it's a fairly uneducated vote either way.
I'll second the Dennis Hardy.
Okay, so motion been made and seconded that we would appoint Dennis Hardy as the village moderator. And basically would have to run in 2024 but to run the May meeting.
This is just yeah, so it's a 1 year.
It's a 1 year.
It's a
you have to,
one-time thing.
that's correct.
Until
It's one, every year you need to run for
I
moderator.
gotcha.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of the motion to appoint Denny Hardy as the village moderator would say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, and Denny Hardy is our new village moderator. We'll move on to item 3 on the agenda, request for event permits. We have 3 event permits that have been requested, and then again, we've added the placement of a banner for our place. So the first one, the permit would be for 8/28/23 for the Bellows Falls Middle School. The information is in your packet. I guess I would entertain a motion to approve the parade and open air event permit for the Bellows Falls Middle School.
My understanding is that there's not a parade, but it's just gonna be out in front of the.
Yeah,
It doesn't say much.
yeah, I think it's barbecue in front of the.
They just want to use some
of
of the street area to mark it off, just to keep some of the traffic away from that side of the school street.
So I think we are hoping it will be okay to cordon off the fire lane and bus drop-off area for the time that they've requested. And it's for a barbecue when school opens.
Right.
So I would entertain a motion to approve that application.
I move that we approve the application for Henry Bailey for the school, the Bellows Falls Middle School, to utilize the space in front from 3:30 to 5:30 on August 28th for the sake of a barbecue.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion been made and seconded that we would approve the application for parade and open air event for the Bellows Falls Middle School on 8/28/23. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. The second application is for the Bellows Falls Community Bike Project. Looks like it's the corner of Henry Street and Atkinson and South, between 20 and 50 youth and adults riding bikes, test riding solar electric bikes and other bikes.
I'll move to approve the application for the community bike project event permit.
I'll second it.
So a motion is made and seconded that we would approve the Bellows Falls Community Bike Project permit. Is there any discussion?
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
So can we approve the use of the streets, the roads?
Yeah, we've had a couple of street
Town,
parties.
it's town highway. Wow, they're in the village, but
Right.
town, how's that work?
Because basically, the disruption is within the village, so The town highway comes to drop off some barricades, it's not a big deal.
The other thing is,
Right.
do we require them to have, and there, some type of liability insurance during this event, since they're the people in the street?
I really don't know the answer to that, so Scott.
Traditionally, no. We haven't had people give us liability insurance. Most of these things are small scale events. I mean, the parades that we do and things like that, it's not something that we would normally do. The larger events, like when we have, old home days or larger scale events, we would, but for these types of events, we typically haven't.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the open air event parade permit for the Bellows Falls Community Bike Project would say aye.
I,
Opposed would say no. And that motion carries. Moving on to the next application for parade and open air event. Looks like the sponsoring organization is BFDDA. Looks like it's on 12/9/23 from 5 to 7 p.m. Looks like it's going down the normal parade route. It looks like it's floats, trucks, cars, ATVs, roughly 50 participants.
I'll make the motion that we approve the application for parade and open air event for applicant BIFTA, for a parade on December 9th, 2023.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion been made and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Well, I'll ask the same, do we require insurance on this one?
If we haven't, no.
I'm just of the opinion that we should, but that's just my thought.
Any other questions or comments?
What would the insurance cover?
Well, if they had their own certificate of insurance for their event, then they would be, if something, unfortunately went wrong or somebody got hurt or otherwise.
Vista may have
Yeah, they probably
insurance,
do.
I don't know.
Right.
I mean, I thought you were wondering, should the village have insurance?
No, we have insurance already, but we shouldn't be the one that pay first dibs to cover their event in the event something goes wrong.
Yeah, it gets to be a little bit of a challenge because lots of people, for example, when the sports teams want to do a lap around the square because we won a football championship or a field hockey championship, it can get a little bit difficult to try to coordinate all the insurances for those types of events. We certainly can try, but it becomes a little bit of a paper chase. To be
Would they
honest.
have an umbrella policy though, if they knew that they had to, they have enough of this down for the school? That's
School insurance is a little funny because a lot of times if they're off property and it's not a school specific sponsored event, sometimes the schools have very specific liability coverages because of that.
But wasn't there a period, or do we still, used to be that the teams would ride in the fire trucks and then there was resistance to that. And they're not anymore,
They
right?
did away with that, but they do, this last year, they rode it in school buses. So there would be insurance, obviously the school insurance would cover.
Yeah, we didn't ask for additional insured for any of those types of events. Again, that's sort of a policy that it's up to the board. It just creates another level of.
I'm not interested in requiring more insurance. There hasn't been a problem. I like the idea of keeping it simple to do these kinds of community events. I completely see the concern, but yeah, it's that balance of making it more difficult to do these things.
Well, I just don't want to,
sure.
my concern is the taxpayers and the residents that put the bill here, so.
I mean, is this negatively impacting our current insurance premiums as a village though,
We had general
No,
liability
okay.
coverages. We've never had a
or claim?
specific claim, but I think Wade's point is there's always a first time, so
Right.
I can't tell you that it would never happen, so.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
Might be something to maybe discuss further down the road for, you know, future, maybe update the policy or.
Okay, any other comments? So we do have a application for parade, open air, permit for, FIFTA for the 9th of December from 5 to 7 PM. All those in favor of approving the application would say aye.
Aye.
Opposed would say no. Motion carries. And then we're going to move on to D. It's hanging a banner, our place drop-in center. So I guess I would entertain a motion to approve the banner application.
Do you know what that banner is?
So I'll pass it around. This is a prototype of what, it's for the overflow of the Opera House event. So they're just advertising for that specific event.
Yeah, she dropped it off with companion. It says attached is the wording, but there was no wording attached to it, so I guess that's.
That's the closest I could get.
I'll make the motion to approve the banner request.
Is there a second?
All second.
So the motion has been made and seconded that we would approve the banner application for our place drop-in center. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor would say aye. Aye. Opposed would say no. And we have approved the banner request. Moved on to number 4 on the agenda. This is the fire feasibility study update funding request.
So this has been on previous tri-board agendas and other agendas, and I know Wade's been very involved in the process of putting together the specifications and working through the proposals that were received. There was a recommendation from the fire committee after review to award the contract to AP Triton, who, by the way, the same people are also doing the work down in Brattleboro at the moment on their fire EMS system. So they have some familiarity in Vermont. They've done other Vermont projects, so this is not their first foray into this type of activity in Vermont. We did have $15,000 from USDA. We had asked for some additional funds since the study came in higher than we anticipated. They did not have any additional money. Saxon's River has added an additional $5,000 to help offset some of those additional costs. I'm requesting another $5,000 tonight from the village, and then we're gonna ask the town to finish the balance so that the project can be completed in total based on the specifications that were written by the equipment committee.
So I'm looking for a motion to add an additional $5,000 from the village of Bellows Falls for the fire feasibility study. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion that we request an addition, that we, as the village, approve an additional $5,000 towards the fire feasibility study.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion is made and seconded. Is there any discussion?
I'd like to hear Wade's thoughts on this.
Putting you on the spot.
My thoughts?
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna ask, where would we get the $5,000 from?
We have enough fund balance to cover that.
I figured.
We're in good shape financially. It won't impact our financial position.
Well, initially, it all started out with that grant, and then, you know, the idea that the 3 different parts of town, the 3 boards would kick in $5,000.
And
But the
just,
price ended up being
So, yeah, 52,000, more than we anticipated.
about $20,000 more, right?
Yes.
this is looking at the feasibility of our fire department, like the financial feasibility, or looking at,
It's a joint effort between Saxon River, Rock and the Bellows Falls boards and towns, villages.
to have one service for everyone.
No, just to kind of evaluate what we do now and to, you know, basically study it and say, hey, this is what you're doing, that's great, and this is how you can improve, and this might be an opportunity to
I gotcha.
save money down the road or.
And they're gonna make recommendations for things like, station locations, our response times, what our equipment mix is, what our current mix of, training is for the various organizations, and then recommendations on other longer term sort of, how can we maintain the fire service going forward? So there'll be a host of recommendations in this report. It will not just be a study to say, okay, this is what you're doing. It's gonna be, I think, more of a comprehensive review and then a series of recommendations, so.
And then no objections. I'm just curious, when's the last time have we done a feasibility study before?
There have been 2 other efforts at doing some sort of fire department, and they were not feasibility studies. They were basically operation studies, for lack of a better word.
But that was just for the village though.
Yeah, and then it
Just
wasn't,
for Bellows Falls. To my knowledge, this is the first one that's ever been.
to look at it comprehensively,
To look
this is
at-
the first
at
time we've
town
really
wide.
taken a look at it.
Never been done before.
I think I saw one of them from the early 90s and one of them from, before that, even prior to that, maybe even the 80s, so.
Outdated information?
And I think the spirit in which this came about, I mean, it was really to provide some clarity and 3 departments not necessarily working in a cohesive way and not knowing what the needs were in each part of town, but having village and town. I look at the expense and say, well, going back 6 months ago, had we been told it was 50,000, would we have contributed 10 then? And I would have. I mean, I think that the information that we are seeking to gain is still of great value.
Any other comments?
Well, I do think it's a good idea to do it, given the complexity, that we currently have, and, I just hope that, when you commission one of these reports, it's like, the old MAI appraisal, made as instructed. And, my feeling is that, I hope cost effectiveness is at a prominent position in this analysis, because, I do think, what motivates me is to do it better and, make sure we have, the right facilities and equipment, et cetera, and do it in a cost-effective way for the taxpayers. So
The good news is, Jakes, the baseline information that comes through that we can work with is from the National Fire something NIFRS it's called. So it's a national database that you have to report all of these fire activities to it. So that's the basis for all of the run data that they can do analysis on. And then they look at standards, how many pieces of equipment do you have? How many firehouses do you have? What's their condition? They look at all of our training. They look at our standard operating procedures. Are we up to date? Are we behind? Are there things we're not doing right? And then they look at affordability. What are some of the things that are going to be required into the future? So that looks at that equipment replacement schedule, which we've talked about a couple times at some of these tri-board meetings, and the numbers for future equipment costs are fairly significant. So I think it's a good opportunity for everybody to take a hard look at some of these things and have an opportunity for a third party to bring all that together. And then the boards, I think, cooperatively have some serious conversations and some decisions to make, I think, once that's received.
Any other comments, discussion?
The only thing I would say to, is just to follow up to Jeff's thing, so actually how this all started was Sax River was looking to do a feasibility study just for them so that they could move forward searching for grants for a new fire station. So that's kind of what initiated all, and then it kind of course, then they come to the town for assistance for their various ways, and just kind of scope just got further from there, but that, I guess that's why the price went up from initial. I think initially they were thinking it was gonna be like 20 grand, right?
Right.
Just for them.
Because it was very limited in scope.
Right.
We added three, the three departments in combination, and it definitely raised the prices.
Anything else? Any other comments, questions? So we have a motion on the floor. It's been seconded that, an additional $5,000 from the Village of Bellows Falls for a total of 10K, would be, appropriated for the fire feasibility study. All those in favor of the motion would say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. And we will move on to item 5 on the agenda. ARPA project list update.
So I know the board was getting tired of seeing the old format. Thank you to Gary that took a lot of your data and boiled it down into something that's a little more user-friendly, and it also followed with your guidance to try to bring the total number of projects down to a more reasonable number that we could focus on. So at the moment, we have these items in front of you, that were the scores, that were the higher scores of all the projects that were in that larger spreadsheet. And then on the back of that, Gary had also then included some additional just explanation detail, in case there was some question about what the specific project entailed. So that was where we are with this currently. I guess what we're looking for tonight is if that looks like what your guidance was, then we'll take this information and start to work on each of these line items to get more detail into those about how these might be started to implement, and making sure that we meet those time deadlines to get these funds spent by the December of 24 deadline for the ARPA fund. So
Any questions or comments? Anything?
Well, we had 884, is that right?
we actually have 886, 357.
Is that the balance after?
Oh, it's up there, okay.
In
And then-
total,
And we,
That was the total, that was.
yes,
So,
and then,
we spent a little bit of that, but not much.
we've dedicated roughly 100 grand to grass, right?
Correct.
So far.
150 it was like 100 for the boiler and 55 for the, oh no, it wasn't 100, or was it 100? Did we?
I thought
I think we did.
I think the board had settled on 100, yeah.
And then it was like 55,000 for the town. For the roof.
For the roofing project, correct.
So,
730,
So about 155,000.
733 is left.
Right.
55 was the roof.
Yes,
yes, I believe
think
so.
roughly that.
to do the reinforcement part of that, to do the potential solar and the new membrane.
So what's that leave?
733.
Roughly, right?
Approximately?
Yeah.
Let's see. Well.
I
My
think
feeling,
the list is all right.
the next highest scoring item is the biosolid storage. We could check into that further now.
Right, which we're still working on with hopefully we still have a large grant request pending with the Long Island
Oh, that's right.
Sound people, as well as the state ARPA funds. So we're hopeful that we can get a big chunk of that paid for with third-party money. If anything, we might need a small amount for matches, but I was hoping to get the vast majority of that through other sources.
I would hope we can, because
How much is the biosolid storage tank? Rough approximately, do we know?
If we did everything that we wanted to do, which includes the heat recapture, some flood proofing, some of the 10-year capital maintenance that we had talked about, and the new and the new system to store and distribute the pellets, it'd be roughly 2.2 million in that neighborhood. So
But how much is just a tank, the storage
we
tank?
broke the tank out just itself. That's a little harder to say because you still have to do some of the other improvements in order to create space for a conveyor system and then to build it. So you could isolate that and say it's, 300 to 400,000, just as a rough number.
And it is, it sounds like it's not necessarily off-the-shelf item. It's almost like a special thing that would have to be engineered, it would seem. I don't
Well, Rob
know.
has talked to some folks that do these things for farms, and he thinks he can get one and they can modify it to make it work fairly well.
I see.
So they don't have to manufacture something specific for us, which would be really expensive.
Yeah.
So he feels pretty confident we can get something that way.
But even that, you think would be in that,
I'm thinking it's gonna be in that neighborhood when it's all said and done.
which would be, I mean, it would help the workflow at this thing. It'd be a nice way for farmers to pick up the stuff. But in terms of the residents, it just,
Well, it also gives us more capacity so we can run the machine
Well,
in a
that's-
more efficient.
there is more,
Right, because right now we're limited to those 1-ton bags and we have to be there while it's running. Now we could run it through the night because it would be able to store, fill the storage, so there are some real advantages to doing that.
Any other questions, comments?
Am I right in assuming that we'll need to we won't be able to just kind of go top to bottom and check things off. We'll need to start making decisions kind of in tandem, right? To make sure that,
Right, so now what this will do for myself and Gary, and we'll be able to then go and start to put together programming around these various items so that it can fit within either a grant application schedule or other ways that we can try to match the funds before we come back
gotcha,
and say, we just have to spend the money,
right?
if that's what you want to do. So that's really what we want to do now, is to try to match them up with the best programs we can find and see if we can leverage these funds and make them stretch.
Yeah, for me, I mean, all of these descriptions, I'm not reading any of them thinking this is off base from what I was thinking. It all seems generally in line. I am, yeah, I don't know if now is the time to get into more details on any of them, but with the sidewalks, I'm curious if it's purely just looking at an inventory and a plan, or if it's looking at actually doing physical repairs and improvements. I don't know the scope.
Well, we have Wyndham Regional doing an updated analysis for us. I don't know exactly when they're gonna be done. We had done a sidewalk inventory back in 2019 or so. And we've kept it somewhat up to date, but it's a little bit rough. Theirs is gonna be a little more sophisticated and more helpful, I think. And the goal for that is to try to go back and talk with the town about putting together a 5-year capital plan to catch up on sidewalk work, because much like we did with paving, we deferred the maintenance on paving, we deferred the sidewalk maintenance, and now we've built up a pretty large inventory of places that need to be updated, so.
Okay, so the idea isn't necessarily that the funding would go towards, sounds like the inventory is happening already.
We started that because we wanted to have that information and try to drive some of the decision-making and give us a sense also of just how much it would potentially cost. So.
Anything else? Anything? If not, then I'll move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is water and sewer.
So a couple things just in passing. So the board had approved previously to do the tank project on Griswold Drive. We had a contract for that work. It was $175,000 with a company. And the state, for whatever reason, was unable to issue us a permit to go ahead and start the construction. The issue that they're claiming now is they're backlogged because of flood-related projects, but we had submitted for our permit
In January.
back in January, so last I checked, it wasn't flooding much in January, but be that as it may, they failed to issue us a permit. We missed the entire season. I contacted the owners and said that they'd be willing to hold prices because of this was beyond our control. He agreed to that, so he's sending me a contract addendum so I can make sure that we sign up and keep our pricing for next year, which is beneficial. And we will pressure the state to make sure that we get a permit and get this project underway for next year. So I guess it's a good news, bad news situation. The good news is the price hasn't increased. The bad news is we won't get it done
This year.
until sometime spring, early summer next year.
So you have to reapply for a new permit? Or
I just have to keep harassing them because the project scope hasn't changed, just the dates. So I just have to get the permit out of them, that's all. So,
So my suggestion, if we need to contact our state reps as well as our county senators and put pressure on them to
yeah, this shouldn't be a big deal.
be calling these guys and getting this taken care of.
It should be fairly simple because we're not the only town that has water tanks that have to be maintenance.
It's hard for me to understand why this is a problem.
But that'd be my suggestion. If we need to,
Yeah.
I'd go to the senators and the reps and just say, we need this and we need you to call up there and get this thing.
Yeah,
for us.
it needs to get done, so. So unfortunately, like I said, that one will slide till next year, so you won't see that project in at least until next spring to get it started. The second thing that is a lot of information, and we sat down, previous conversations, Jigs has asked us to look into the billing and some of the variances in our revenues in the sewer fund, and very specifically how it relates to how things are billing through Walpole. So we put together some data and had a meeting and sat down and went through some things and went into the detail about the flows and some of the questions and concerns. And you can see as part of that conversation, there is formulas about how various flows, some of the biosolids and how they are charged for very specific operational costs. But what you'll notice is, and the page that I thought we had not had a chance to discuss, but we have updated since, is when you look at the flow data, and then you see when we have rainy months. So we just picked July in the last 3 years, right? Because we've had a horrible July of 21 where we had bad storms. July of last year was fairly normal. And then July of this year, again, you can see we had over 10 inches of rain. And the impact on the average flows is fairly significant when you look at what it does to the gallons per day in the plant itself. It can go up, you know, in that really rainy month, you see it went all the way up to 726,000 gallons a day. In 22, it went back down to a more normal 473. And then this year, again, it's gone back up. And so what that shows is there's a percentage of I&I. So infiltration and inflow, which gets into these, gets into the sewer pipes, and basically then it's pushing more liquids, really you're treating rainwater, as opposed to sewage necessarily in these high volume months. But it also then changes our billing percentages because the solids and the percentages are all off based on those additional flows. So it makes our budgeting and our revenue targets a little bit of a shot in the dark because of these rain events. So we have missed, on some years we've missed our targets, and other years we've been, fairly close. On these high rain event years, we are definitely missing for some reason. And I don't know if that's necessarily because of a flaw in the formula or just because of the total amount of flows that it decreases the percentage overall that would be charged back to Walpole. So.
Well, I think this was the new thing.
That was a piece we didn't have, and we talked about, and I told you we'd try to get to you because.
And
right.
If in an ideal world, you could say, all right, 1 inch of rain is equal to X gallons per day or whatever it is, per day.
Mm-hmm.
If in these cases, if it was always the same, that would be great.
Right.
Then it wouldn't, okay. But if the flow from the rain gets counted as Bellows Falls flow. And of course, it rains in Walpole too.
Right, so both flows
So
go up, right, because their flow goes specifically to that flow meter that's on their side, right, as it crosses over and
Yeah.
comes to our side. But our flows are also impacted, so we're still seeing issues on our side. So it probably is a two-pronged approach. We really probably have to go back and do more I&I work to try to eliminate as many of these locations as possible so that we're not treating rainwater as sewage, which is sort of what it's worth this time. So that's something that we can start to get into in more detail. And then on the Walpole side, it's a little more difficult, but I think we can work with them on that as well and see if that makes an impact to get to a better number that we can at least feel like we're able to budget more closely to reality, because there are large fluctuations based on these flows.
Yeah, I think that intuitively, I think of Bellows Falls, because Bellows Falls is the primary source of supply for the sewer treatment plant. And then Walpole, I'm not sure how much of Walpole is covered. I think North Walpole is covered to some extent and parts of Walpole. But the impression I have is more activity in Walpole, but that might not be the case when it comes to sewage. And I think that the two issues for me is that we're accurately monitoring the flows from Walpole. And if you look at these numbers, just look at this, what you passed out today, okay? This sheet here.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
this one here.
Yeah, yeah.
If you use 2021 as a base, okay, 2022 in comparison for Bellows Falls, in comparison to 2021 was 65% of the flow. For 23, it was 95.6% of the flow, almost back. Walpole, using their numbers, 2022, they're 51% of the flow from the previous year, and 79% in 23. So it would appear just from that incomplete and possibly erroneous data that for some reason the Walpole flows are going down relative to the Bellows Falls flows. And as I said, intuitively that doesn't make sense to me, but maybe to Rob and to the other people it does. I mean, I don't know if Walpole is doing something else with regards to sewage or whatever, I don't know, but
I don't think they have any other treatment that I'm aware of, Jakes, so I don't know unless
but
somebody.
the key to this is the flow, and this rain thing really needs to be parsed out in terms of either eliminating it in the calculations or attempting to eliminate it.
Well, I think the next step is for us to look at it on an annual basis, right? Because I just picked these July numbers because they were so dramatically out. You can see in 3 years how much the rain totals just in those 3 Julys were so different. So now we'll go back and take a longer look maybe at total rainfall, because he has pretty good rain data. And we can see, is there some correlation with that on an overall basis? Because sometimes you could have a really wet July and it might be, August to October might be dry. So now you sort of, you trend back to the mean. I don't know. So we'll look into it in more detail and see if I can find something that makes more sense. But you can certainly see the impacts with these wet weather events. It really does change our
Right,
our data.
I can remember talking to Rob in the past, and it's interesting because some of the rainwater flow that we have doesn't go into the sewer treatment plant. Is that correct? Isn't that correct? I mean,
Well, yeah,
these,
most of it
storm
should,
drain
most of it should be
is
separated.
separate, okay?
But we still unfortunately have a lot of roof drains which are still connected to, so they're dual sanitary and storm of some of the older buildings. And to separate those out is a major undertaking.
Yeah.
On some of these buildings.
But I think in terms of, you know, if the flow from that source is more of a Bellows Falls phenomenon and not a Walpole phenomenon, then you want to try to exclude that from what the plant is doing, I guess. I mean, it would just seem as though.
Well, yeah, in some respects, because of the flows are impacting us more dramatically, it decreases their percentages,
Yeah.
basically, right? So the incentive would be to try to capture as much of that or get it out of there, quite frankly, not capture it, just separate
Get it out, yeah.
Correct. So one of the things we're hoping to do with this Canal Street project is to look and see if there are some of those older buildings down through there that might still have the combined systems. We might be able to, since we're gonna tear up the street, we might be able to do some work there and see some benefit as well. So we're gonna look at some of these things and see if there's ways we can reduce that. Because that I&I it's a waste of everybody's time and money to run rainwater through a sewage treatment plant.
Yeah, correct.
So in the long run, it makes sense.
The other thing I had, Paul, was on this sheet here. The budget sheet. There's a few of them that basically are less than 100%. And I'm curious, particularly on the manager and office staff expense, the vehicle expense, and the replacement reserve expense. Of course, there was nothing in there this year, but we normally allocate 7,000, I think, for reserve. I'm assuming the personnel expense isn't 100% because we do work for Saxon's River.
Right.
And, you know, I don't think it's 25% of the workforce, but you know, I'd be curious as to, I mean, let's face it, the manager expense that we see here is strictly the expense of the wastewater plant. It's not any other part of your duties. You know, we have you're budgeted in the water department, you're budgeted in the village for this type of thing and for the town. So I'm just surprised that, and then the office staff, obviously, if we don't do billing for Walpole, then you could understand some difference in that. But I'd be interested to hear back from Rob on the rationale.
We'll work on that. Okay.
Anything else? Or any?
No, I appreciate the work that went into it.
Yeah, we'll keep working at it because I think, you know, we've opened a few doors here. We have a few more things to look into for sure.
Anything else on water sewer? If not, yeah, absolutely.
What was I&I? Infiltration and inflow. Yes. That's a fancy term for stuff getting in the sewer.
All right.
Spray getting in the sewer.
So review agenda items for the next meeting, which is September 12th,
We'll have a full set of financials for that meeting, for sure.
okay?
Will it be a kind of a final run on the previous year?
Yes, I think we're pretty close with closeouts and all of the, yeah, I would say that we'll be pretty close. Yes, I think we would have that, James, because she's done pulling everything for the audit, so I think we're in good shape to close everything out now on the prior year, so.
On page 6 or 7, there's a sewer line. Budget of 1,000, actual of 11,000, is that?
Right corner.
Well, some of that was we bought some additional materials because we're gonna do a couple of small jobs. One of those was on Forest. And there's another small job where we had some problems. We were replacing some pipes that were problematic in places that we paved. So we brought some additional materials for those. And they were just specific to streets that we were paving. We had troubles in some of those spots, so we did some repairs while the streets were torn up.
Anything else for September 12th?
Do we already do water and sewer rates?
We were gonna look in January. We were gonna talk about a potential increase. So
Okay.
we have nothing.
Nothing for
We're good for now. Yep.
Because I thought we were gonna do something.
We were gonna take a look at it mid-year and talk about it. Yep.
Anything else for the September 12th meeting?
What do we have on there now? Anything?
Financials.
Financials, I really haven't looked that far out to see if there's anything else specific for that one. We are gonna talk about tax sale at the tribe board meeting, so that'll be on there, which is a weekend, the 26th. I can't remember anything else specific for the 12th off the top of my head.
And after September, we resume to once a month, but what day?
I haven't put a schedule together after September, so we'll have to chat.
So that would be a September 12 item.
Definitely, we can talk about our schedule.
Anything else?
Anything else?
Okay.
Pick up right now.
How about review agenda items for the joint board meeting of September 26th? We've heard Scott mention tax sales.
Right. We're gonna have a presentation from the Road Group folks again. So they were coming. I think there's one other presentation that's escaping me at the moment. So.
How is the Bellows Falls Garage leasing going?
We did a closing with them because they had to close on all of the funds that went through CDBG and other things. They had their final mortgage and everything together, so there was a difference here. They've done very well with the leasing. I think they're over 3/4 leased already. And I think they're pretty close to being, they have applicants or things in the way that
Yeah.
in the process to be fully leased fairly soon. So that's gone very well.
Good.
Including some local people, I think, too.
Yes.
Which was nice to hear, so.
Anything else for joint board meeting that you have? And if you think of something else, you can either email myself or Scott, just to say, look, can we add this to the agenda or whatever. At this point, we'll have review and approve orders, bills, and warrants. I entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve orders, bills, and warrants.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion been made and seconded that we would approve and sign orders, bills, and warrants. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor would say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion has carried. Other business, is there any other business? Jeff, Jakes, Wade,
I can't think of anything. I don't really have anything, no.
Only thing I'll say is school starting, so we'll probably have some enhanced enforcement efforts around the schools, kids being, walking to school and parents and dropping off, and you'll notice, all that increased activity, so hopefully people will drive accordingly, pay attention. Little people don't always pay attention, so big people sort of have to. So
When
it's
is
that
the first
time
day
of
of
year.
school?
I think it's next Wednesday, isn't it?
Next week,
The 30th is the
Oh,
first.
third. Okay,
30th?
30th.
yeah.
so it's coming up. Yeah.
It's next Wednesday.
Yeah,
And the paving's winding down, sort of right in line with that, isn't it?
yep, we'll be done in time for school. And we still have some crosswalk work to do on Pine Street, but we'll start that packing up probably later September. So,
Anything else under other business? No executive session
what's
tonight,
that?
and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Motion been made and seconded that we adjourn. All in favor would say aye. We are now adjourned.